Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our July board meeting. And before we get to the public speakers today, I'd like to extend a special thank you to the Governor Cuomo, for nominating me as Chairman and CEO of the Metropolitan Transportation Authority, and to the New York State Senate for confirming that nomination last month. I truly appreciate their support, and I look forward to working together with all of the board members in terms of dealing with all the challenges and opportunities that the MTA faces. I'd also like to take a moment to remember a colleague and dear friend of ours who passed away last month. That was Susan Kupferman. Susan was most recently the senior advisor to the chairman, but had previously served as the MTA's chief operating officer and president of MTA Bridges and Tunnels and other positions. She was exceptionally talented and thoughtful and a warm human being. She was ill for many years, but even as she underwent debilitating treatments, she continued to come into the office and devote her full energies to what she loved to do so much, was to be a public servant. Her dedication to the MTA and her incredible grace and strength were nothing short of extraordinary. We extend our deepest sympathies to her husband, Bernie McGarry, her father, brothers, sisters, nieces, nephews, and her many friends, all of whom were devastated by her loss. We will miss her terribly and remember her always, and I'd like to ask for a moment of silence in her memory. Thank you. One last note before our public speakers. Within the past week, 4 MTA employees have taken extraordinary measures to protect our customers, and in all cases risking their lives to do so, something we've been come to see numerous times over my entire career here, and it never ends. First is Antoine Taylor, a 7-year veteran at New York City Transit. Antoine was cleaning a subway station when a scream alerted him to a man lying incapacitated on the tracks, and as a train entered the station. Using the instincts we've come to expect from MTA employees, Antoine sprang into action, quickly signaling the motorman to hit the brakes using his MTA-issued flashlight. The train stopped, the man was pulled from the tracks, and a life was saved. Then there's Jim Fortunato, Vice President of MTA Bridges and Tunnels, and MTA Bridge and Tunnels officers Jimmy Moy and John Esposito. And unless you know these guys, the story is almost too incredible to believe. The short version is that they worked together to help rescue 2 people stuck in a burning truck on the Verrazano Narrows Bridge. That truck had slammed into a garbage truck and caught fire. And this was no ordinary rescue. First, the team used fire extinguishers to try to put out the flames. But the fire could not be contained, and the passengers were still stuck in the driver's compartment. So get this. Jimmy Fortunato comes up with an idea to go up to the garbage truck, with the truck that got hit, take the hydraulic winch off that truck, connect it to the underside of the car door where the people were trapped, and used that device to open up the car and get the people out. Jim Fortunato then climbed beneath the burning truck to hook the winch to the undercarriage so the truck could be pulled off the railing where it was stuck. By the time the fire department arrived, the truck was free, and they had extracted the other passenger. We will formally recognize Antoine Taylor, Jim Fortunato, Jimmy Moy, and John Esposito at September's board meeting. But I didn't want to wait another moment to commend these brave men and let everyone know about these everyday heroes in our midst. They are truly heroes. We're now going to hear from our public speakers, and I want to make sure people know the way we're going to. We want to actively listen to what they're saying and provide the opportunity. But we have quite a few people signed up. We also have a very aggressive agenda and board business that needs to be done. So we will devote the better part of an hour to listening to the public speakers. If there's still a long list of people needing to speak, we will suspend the public speaking at that time, conduct the business of the board, and go back to hearing those public speakers. And I won't be hard and fast on that hour because it depends to see how many people are left. But we do need to get the business of the board moving, and we do want to hear the public speakers. Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The first speaker will be Bill Henderson, will be followed by Assemblyman Jim Brennan. Bill Henderson.
Good morning. I'm Bill Henderson, Executive Director of the PCAC. I want to make several comments on matters before the board today. One, we believe that returning the board schedule to 11 meetings per year is a correct call. We recognize that these meetings require a large investment in time, but we also believe that a monthly meeting schedule with a break in August is appropriate for an organization as vast and complex as the MTA. with the meetings occurring at various times of the month. Reporting on the operating agency performance was less effective and harmed the transparency of the organization. And we welcomed the return to the 11-meeting-a-year schedule. As part of the proposal on meeting schedules, the MTA and its agencies would schedule president's forums in lieu of the chairman's forums that were to be held under the current system of meetings. We applaud this effort, as our councils have for many years held president's forums in cooperation with the MTA's operating agencies. We've also become increasingly aware of the limitations of an in-person format for these meetings, and would welcome an opportunity to discuss alternatives that could expand the reach of these events and make them more accessible to the riders. We'd be pleased to provide whatever assistance we can as the President's forums are planned and held. Finally, I want to thank the Board for maintaining a focus on service, an effort that culminated in the service enhancements that were presented earlier this week. The enhancements aren't everything that the riders need, but they're a start. In discussing these enhancements, the point has been made several times that changes must be sustainable, and we agree with that. But a substantial part of ensuring that these changes are sustainable is ensuring that the MTA and its operating agencies have access to stable, reliable funding that allows them to meet existing and emerging rider demands. As I commented at the Finance Committee, we continue to be concerned about the future funding of the MTA and the impact of capital needs and associated debt to meet these needs on the long-term financial health of the MTA. Now is the time to have a wide-ranging discussion with our elected leaders and establish a rational funding system that can maintain the MTA through good times and bad. Thank you.
Next speaker is Assemblyman Brennan, to be followed by John Samuelson. Is Mr. Samuelson here?
Good morning. I'm Assemblymember Jim Brennan. I represent the 44th Assembly District in Brooklyn, parts of Park Slope, Kensington, Flatbush, and Windsor Terrace. And I also chair the Assembly Standing Committee on Corporations, Authorities, and Commissions. The plan that you are about to adopt, over $100 million a year in service restorations and improvements, is welcome relief to the public and addresses the sacrifices that have been made by both the workforce and the ridership over the past few years as we are now emerging from the recession. And I want to commend these sustainable improvements because they are due to effective management, an ever-improving, healthier economy, and the governor and the legislature appropriating the dedicated funds that are supposed to be due you in the first place. I hope that you will work closely with the affected communities in relation to these service restorations and improvements to fine-tune them as you implement them. And I commend to your attention two pieces of legislation designed to improve mass transit in the city and state of New York. One is a bill passed by both the Assembly and Senate, not yet sent to the governor, called the Locked Box Bill, which requires that in the event the state government sweeps any of the dedicated funds to the MTA, that there be a economic and service impact statement to accompany any such sweep. Hopefully no further sweeps will take place, but in the event that they were to do that, there would be additional information to the public about the impact. The other is a required service analysis in relation to the cuts that took place, and a requirement that the governor and the legislature receive a plan to mitigate the past cuts. We believe that about half the cuts have now been restored, at least on a dollar basis, and so we hope that the operating budget will be able to improve or provide additional relief. Of course, the main challenge is how to fund the capital budget going forward, because if you're going to borrow another $14 billion to fund the next capital budget, the debt service on that is astronomical and will impede the ability to gain further service improvements. So I just want the board and the management to work closely with the governor and the legislature in the next year as we prepare to fund the next capital plan. And so that both the operating budget and the capital budget and the construction budget can stay in effective balance to provide the quality mass transit service that the public needs and deserves. and thank you for the service improvements. Thank you.
Thank you very much. John Samuelson. If Mr. Samuelson's not in the room, we'll move to John Rose, who will be followed by Robert Jackson. John Rose? Is there a John Rose? Yeah, he's here. He's here. John Rose is with. John Rose? Okay. Oh, there he is. Good. Thank you. You couldn't see you behind you.
Good morning. My name is John Rose. I've been waiting for advocate for disabled people in Co-op City, who I am very are dependent on good quality bus and centralized service. Before the budget cuts of 2012, I have had already able co-op I feel very happy with the service provided. But since the MTA budget cuts of June 2012, not at all. I look towards any station, we live there more than one third of Co-op City government population are over the age of 60. And the majority of our people are disabled, one degree or another. In fact, Co-op City has been designated a national government private community or not program for more than a decade. And in fact, the largest mark program in the nation. Most of these are in the fixed income population, largely dependent on bus transportation. But did the MTA take this back into consideration in their budget cuts? No, they did not. What they did is relieve many disabled and residents and all the people residents out in the cold in the winter, in the heat, in the summer, waiting for buses to go around Co-op City, while other younger populations unlike Co-op City were not affected at all. Co-op City is a community of more than 15,000 homes and over 50,000 residents. We were started as a community over 40 years ago. The MTA would provide bus service for Co-op City because no subway service to that area could be provided. The MTA Board has reneged on that obligation. We believe it's I put back the application and restore the bus routes to closely as they were. One final point I'd like to make on personal level. I find it outrageous in this day and age that the director of the satellite program is not a qualified disabled person. I'm not saying that the disability should be the only qualification. All the thousands of disabled people in New York City, I'm shooting MTA to find one qualified disabled person to run the satellite program. No, I'm not looking for a job. I'm retired, so I don't want a job. But it's about time the MTA hired a qualified disabled person to run the satellite program. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much. Councilman Jackson, to be followed by Violetta Maya.
Good morning, everyone. Is this on? Yeah. Good morning. My name is Robert Jackson, and I represent the 7th Councilmatic District, which includes parts of Morningside Heights, Hamilton Heights, West Harlem, Washington Heights, and Inwood. And as a city council member, I hear the concerns and worries of my constituents every single day. And as a lifelong New Yorker, I know the importance of keeping our transit system running to satisfactorily move millions of passengers around our great city. And I'm here today to implore the MTA Board, you members, to invest the money you receive from the state to restore, enhance New York City transit service and maintain the safety and security of our riders. It is of extreme importance that the MTA restore the service cuts of 2010, which includes reinstalling station booths and agents. These workers are the first responders for strap hangers and offer them vital information and a sense of security. Unfortunately, the 2010 service cuts have come at the expense of the public. Strap hangers who have already experienced the loss of these station booths and agents are more likely to experience crime, dirty subway stations, deteriorating conditions, and vandalism, such as broken Metro card vending machines and turnstiles. About 2 years ago, a constituent, Grace Valdez, currently a 21-year-old Washington Heights resident, had enough of the terrible conditions at West 181st Street on the A line that she started a petition drive seeking answers. I raised these concerns at the May 22, 2012 City Council Executive Budget hearing. In a letter dated August 6, 2012, then Transit President Thomas Pendergast responded that the 181st Street A station is on the NYPD's top 10 list of high vandalism crime incidents. This is unacceptable to all. The safety and security and service of my constituents are being compromised. May I request one additional minute, sir?
Yes.
Yes? Thank you. In addition, residents have complained that the constantly vandalized equipment at the unattended 181st Street station causes them to be late for work, school, and after being forced to swipe their Metro card several times and risk being cheated out of fares. Who does a passenger turn to for immediate help? The answer? No one. In fact, the same reference letter, I was provided with another important statistic that clearly demonstrates the difference between staffed and unstaffed stations. Let me be clear. These statistics come from the same station, but with unstaffed entrance. The riders wouldn't be left stranded in the station or be forced to walk 3 blocks to the nearest booth. Geographically speaking, it's the deepest subway station in the system, 181st and 190th Street in my district. It's very difficult for people to walk 3 blocks up to the next station booth. I urge you to fully restore the service cuts from the MTA's 2010 service cuts and increase investments in our public transit system. What I've said downstairs at the rally, we need more federal money, state money, and local money invested in mass transit so we can provide the type of service that we need in order to move our public. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Violeta Maya. Ms. Maya will be followed by Andy King, if he's here.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Violeta Maya. I'm a board member of the Lutheran Family Health Centers and co-founder of the B37 Bus Coalition. The lack of the B37 has deeply impacted businesses on 3rd Avenue, which rely on the B37 to bring their shoppers and their workers to their location each day. Not having the B37 towards our progress as we look forward to a massive revitalization of the Sunset Park waterfront, and we are ready a new merchants association stretching from Sunset Park to Park Slope. Notably, the opening of Barclays Center in 2012 has increased our visits to downtown Brooklyn. To be sure, restoring the B37 would increase the revenue for the MTA from the B37. In response to the elimination of the B37, locals, elders, uprose, Lutheran Family Health Centers, and Transit Forwards founded the B37 Bus Coalition to organize residents, businesses, elected officials, community groups, and civic organizations along the 3rd Avenue corridor, covering Brooklyn Heights, Boerum Hill, Gowanus Red Hook, Sunset Park, and Bay Ridge. We spent over 3 years organizing and collecting petitions, and we were filled with hope last week when we received word that the B37 is on the MTA's list of possible service restoration. We thank you for placing the B37 on the restoration list. We hope you work both in favor of fully restoring the B37. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Andy King will be followed by Maria Escalera.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and congratulations to you. My name is Andy King, Councilmember Andy King. I represent the 12th District in the Bronx. And one of the communities that we're here talking about today, my friends and my family and my neighbors, friends and my families and neighbors are residents from the Co-op City area. And while you make these tough decisions and these new good decisions on how you're going to move forward in this year's budget, I ask you to consider the passion and the pleas and the energies of the people from Co-op City who experienced some terrible situations of trying to navigate around Co-op City after the 2010 budget cuts. I'm asking you for your help because when I have to listen to my seniors who live in a community which is the largest NOC in the United States, it's a different animal in Co-op City when it comes to our seniors. When I hear concerns of them sitting at bus stops going to the bathroom on themselves because of bus times, the dual fares that people have to pay to get around Co-op City, in and out of Co-op City. I know that, we had a tough challenge in 2010 and you had to make some tough decisions, but I'm asking you in 2013 to consider the people that you may never ever meet in your lives, but the grandparents, the children who have to go to schools, the rush hour times that the buses are just tied up and buses have to go by because people can't get on them. I'm asking you for your help to make sure that Co-op City becomes the great place that it was designed to when the buses were created for that particular establishment, that particular miniature llama, which we all know, which standalone city by itself would be the 10th largest in the state of New York. I'm asking you to look at it as a different monster than what it is. And I'm asking you for your help to restore the buses to make sure that Co-op City continues to be a vibrant place with the new mall coming, that people are able to get around comfortably, safely, and respect that's due to this community. I'm asking you for your support. I'm asking you for your help. I'm asking you, please, restore the bus services that make sense for the city of Co-op City. Thank you again.
Thank you, Maria Escalera. And then we'll have William Colton after Ms. Escalera. Mr. Colton in the room, I hope.
Good morning. My name is Maria Escalera. Thank you. My name is Maria Escalera, the Advocacy Coordinator for Lutheran Family Health Centers. I am a member of the Restore the B37 Bus Coalition. The loss of the B37 bus impacted the elderly, disabled, families, youth, and persons with chronic illness who rely on the bus to access their health and social services. The wheelchair-accessible B37 bus was our lifeline. The B37 bus was the only bus line that was close to the dozens of Lutheran Family Health Center sites that we have in Brooklyn, New York. Lutheran's 6,000 homeless community medicine patients who come from all corners of the city. Public transit is the only means of transportation to and from appointments. The program often provided Metro cards for the patients to use to keep their appointments. Without a bus that is close to the main site, a significant portion of our homeless patients are cut from their care. Thank you for placing the B37 bus on your restoration list, and I hope that the vote today will be yes to restore it fully. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. Colton? Mr. Colton will be Mr. Colton be followed by Murad Awade.
Good morning. I would like to first thank you for listening to the voices of people in the neighborhoods, the parents, the children, the families, the small businesses, people with disabilities, people who are unable to use the subway system in order and restoring these bus cuts, especially last year, the B64. This year I have petitions and letters from a dozen community organizations in support of restoring the X28 weekend service, which particularly in conjunction with the R-Train repairs that are being done, I think becomes important. But you have the mission of deciding what is needed in terms of meeting the public transportation needs of the city. That's a very big responsibility, and I appreciate what you did last year in meeting that responsibility, and I call upon you this year to work again, to use public dollars, to use the monies that are available to restore services to people, and listen to the people, including the employees of the MTA, in terms of making those decisions. We've heard speakers on the B37, which my colleague, Councilman Gentile, has been gathering information and support for, Co-op City, many different areas. Please listen to the people and use your intelligence, your information, to do the restorations that are so desperately needed in our city. And I want to thank you, and I hope next year to be back to thank you for the restorations that you intend to make this year, because it is important for all of our families. It's an important mission. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Murad Awade, followed by Kenneth Kearns.
Good morning. My name is Murad Awada. I'm the environmental justice organizer at UPROS and the lead coordinator with the Restore the B37 Bus Coalition. A couple of our coalition members spoke earlier, just to give you guys a glimpse of how broad and huge the coalition is. It includes 14 elected officials from downtown Brooklyn all the way down to Fort Hamilton. It has a number of state, city officials, over 20 civic organizations along the corridor, and everyone a part of the coalition represents the communities that are missing the bus that they so desperately need back. The B37 was the lifeline for everyone who needed it most, and that was the seniors within the community and the senior homes along the corridor, and the folks trying to access medical assistance, and young people trying to get to after-school programs. In the past 5 years, there have been 5 extreme weather events. Two of the 5 events have affected and shut down the subway system. The MTA has to invest in surface transportation to meet the needs of our communities. With the restoration of the B37, Southwest communities in Brooklyn, we would be able to build local community resilience in the wake of another extreme weather event. We would like to thank you for placing the B37 bus back on the restoration list, and hopefully you guys vote for it today. And that's pretty much it. Thank you.
Thank you. Kenneth Kearns, then Frank Austin.
Good morning, Chairman Pendergast, board members, and a special good morning to Mr. Ferrer. Hello. My name is Kenneth Kearns. I'm District Manager of Bronx Community Board 10, and I'd like to thank the board for its response to our request for a comprehensive traffic study for the Co-op City community. We greatly appreciate that. We urge the board to move forward with great swiftness, and we hope to see some positive movement in the future. And again, thank you very much.
Thank you. Frank Austin, to be followed by Kevin Carroll.
Good morning. My name is Frank Austin. I'm a bus operator for 24 years, and right now I'm working at Local 100 with the task of helping the bus operators that are being assaulted. I know you've seen in the news the recent assaults that's been happening to the bus operators, but I don't know if you know that your bus operators, your employees are frustrated. They're frustrated because they want to know what is the MTA doing for them. Right now, you're installing partitions in a bus, but since the death of Edwin Thomas in 2010, that was stabbed because of a transfer, your partitions are being installed like a Band-Aid to a gashing wound, and they're not going fast enough. I also respond to a lot of the assaults. You had one in Manhattan, 2 in the Bronx in 1 week. We thought we had cameras on the bus. The camera did not work. And lastly, there was a gang assault in the Bronx, and the bus operator slashed severely in the arm. Fortunately, because of the partition in the bus operator didn't have any vital organs slashed on his body, and he's here to talk about it, but he did not want to come today, and I did invite him to come. Lastly, I've been going through the justice system when they are having arrests on people that assault your bus operators. And it seems that there is a disparity. One of the disparities is when it's a New York City police officer or any civil servant, when you go to the assailant, they mention their name and they mention the officer's first name and then say New York City Police Department. When a bus operator is assaulted, and as it has been, we've been going to the court system, and the bus operator is not identified by an MTA employee. He or she is identified by their name, and that's all that happens in this court system. So if you have any input, we're saying that your employees need to know that you care about us. We transport these people. We transport the community. And I'm going to wrap it up by saying, please help us. Thank you. Oh, and if I can have one more second, please. There was an initiative by the governor. It was the Transit Watch program, and I think it was about 5 months ago. With the last 3 recent assaults, we were expecting to see your employees something in the media or in the news saying that there's Transit Watch, just like if a cop is shot. There was no mention of that at all in the public. And that's why I said that your employees feel frustrated that you're not doing anything. This Transit Watch program system has not been posted on any buses. It has not been posted on any New York City Transit property. And if we need to let the community know something, we need to let them know with your help. Thank you.
Thank you. Kevin Carroll. And then we'll hear from Brander White after Mr. Carroll.
Good morning, board members. My name is Kevin Peter Carroll. I'm here representing City Council member Steve Levin, who represents the 33rd District in Brooklyn, as well as I'm also a Bay Ridge Democratic District leader for the 64th Assembly District. And I'm here because Councilmember Levin wanted me to convey, as well as my own sentiments about the B37 bus. That we are very happy that you may be voting today to restore the service. We hope that you take that vote and vote in the affirmative. And I'm someone who, as I mentioned, I live in Bay Ridge, but I work on Atlantic Avenue, so I would take the B37 bus from one end to the other. Right now I do take the R train, but there's a lot of people who can't take the R train, whether for accessibility reasons or other reasons, that they can't get down the stairs. And so this B37 bus is a vital lifeline to our downtown, to bring people to our businesses, connecting people to our many hospital systems. Lutheran comes to mind. And it's so important. I hear from people in Bay Ridge, in my area, that we wanted this bus back. We've worked closely with Councilmember Gentili's office to make sure that you guys hear the concerns of our neighbors. And also, in Councilmember Levin's district, we've heard a lot from people in public housing. We've heard from people in Wyckoff Gardens who are right on 3rd Avenue, and they used to use that bus pre-2010 when it was cut. And so the councilman is so happy that those public housing residents are going to be able to to use the mass transportation. The only critique that we have, and we would ask that you look at this, and please, we implore you to really maybe change this, is we understand that right now we've heard proposals that the route is going to stop at the Barclays Center, and it will not continue into downtown the way that it used to. We feel that is important. To go all the way into downtown. The council member represents all of downtown, most of downtown Brooklyn, and he thinks it's important for the people in his entire southern part of his district to have service to the B37 bus. So we would ask to extend it past and extend full service to the way it used to be pre-2010. With that, I thank you everyone for your service and enjoy the day. Thank you.
Thank you. Brander White to be followed by Latanya Crisp-Soray. Brander White. Then Latanya Crisp-Soray. Hope I got that right.
Good morning, board members. My name is Latanya Crisp-Soray. I stand here as the recording secretary of TW Local 100. I also stand here for all the women who are working in non-traditional titles in the MTA that don't have a restroom. I'm talking about the people, the ladies that are in MOW, CEB, where there are bathrooms in the facilities, but they're all for our male counterparts. I'm talking about facilities where people have to stand and look out for the women to use the restroom. I'm talking about the track workers or the ladies who have to go down into the tunnels, and there's no restroom for them where they have to use the restroom on the tracks. So I ask this board today to consider finding a resolution in regards to the restrooms for the ladies so that we, as your employees, have a place to use the restroom. Secondly, I stand here as a bus operator and a former depot chair. When we speak on special ops, some people may not understand what a special op. Special op is when you ask an operator to drive a bus that is not working properly. We no more can stand here and say, yes, we'll do that. We have mechanics who are trained to fix the buses. Whether you have to pay them overtime or not to fix the buses, it is not our job as operators to take out a bus and then call the dispatcher who wants to write us up because the call did not come in properly. Lastly, I stand here as a commuter from the Ronkonkoma line. Yes, I do have my universal pass, but there's an issue with that surcharge when you go back onto the trains, the Long Island Railroad, and you say, listen, I need to change my ticket or exchange it, and the surcharge is 90% of what the fare is. So please look into these things, look into it as a TWU Local 100 member who works for MTA, and look at me also as a person who rides your system. Thank you.
Thank you. Amy Vorghese. Is Amy Vorghese here? How about Priscilla Consolo? Ms. Consolo will be followed by Maurice Jenkins.
Good morning, Board, Mr. Chairman. And I work for Assemblyman Bill Colton. I am a resident of Southwest Brooklyn, and I'm co-chair of the Southwest Brooklyn Transit Improvement Coalition. And we are here today to ask you to please consider restoring weekend service to the X28 Express bus. This is a very important bus line for Southwest Brooklyn. It runs all the way from the Dyker Heights area through Bensonhurst and Bath Beach, all the way down into Coney Island, all the way to the Seagate community. So it services a lot of people in Southwest Brooklyn. And in our neighborhoods, most of the subway lines are elevated. So for senior citizens, it's very difficult for many of them to walk up the stairs to the elevated train stations to take the subway to get into Manhattan. So many of them do prefer using the express bus to travel into Manhattan. Also, for the economy in our neighborhoods, for small businesses, to restore this service on the weekend would definitely help them as well as to consider the R-Train Montague tunnel closure that will be happening soon in August, to restore the X28 as a way to alleviate the riders who will not be able to travel on the R train into Manhattan. They could perhaps use the X28 to travel into Manhattan. That might be an alternative that will help a lot of people, a lot of strap hangers, a lot of commuters. And on the weekend, some people have to work. You know, they come to the city for recreation, doctor's appointments, shopping, whatever it may be. So there's a lot of reasons why people from Southwest Brooklyn want to travel to Manhattan. They want to take the express bus. So we're asking you, on behalf of Assembly Member Bill Colton, who spoke before, and the Southwest Brooklyn Transit Improvement Coalition, to please consider restoring weekend service to the X28 express bus. Thank you.
Thank you. Maurice Jenkins, to be followed by Mr. X.
Good morning. Good morning. I see some familiar faces. For the new faces, I'd like to congratulate you. I'm here today to talk about the lost, okay? A child with special needs tries to get on the train with his mother. Doors closed. Mother's in a panic. But she taught that child one thing. If you get lost, you go to the booth. In a panic, she goes to the booth. Quick thinking station agent, as he hits the emergency to let the police know that there's a lost child here, also calls up the line. Contacts with the mother. Gets the child to stay there till the mother comes. Another instance. There's a gentleman visiting the city. He has Alzheimer's. He too gets on the train with one of his family members. He too gets separated from his family members. And in the same instant, quick thinking station agent calls up the line. But this time, since the person with Alzheimer's did not go to the booth, he was able to contact the next station up, and while they were waiting for the police, have the cleaner go and retrieve this gentleman, because the person got off and went to the booth and told him who his name was and where he was and what he was wearing. We can't lose sight of what's important. I just heard today that you guys are thinking about floating a $17 billion bond. And the payment, when it comes due, will create draconian measures just like the bonds that you issued in the past created in 2010. And what happened with those draconian measures is you lost 456 potential heroes. We can't lose sight the actions that we have today and the impact that it will have tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. X, to be followed by Kendall Collins.
Just 3 points followed by my closing statement. My condolences to Susan Kufferman. I wish I could have known her better as well as you did. Okay, that's point 1. Point 2, 7 weeks ago today, June 5, an MTA board member was disrespectful to the city council members, particularly Dominic Recker, at City Hall. Therefore, he should be dismissed as an MTA board member. Looks like one of the actors is starting to lose his space. Now, the best for last. We're joined by Tom Prendergast, a schizophrenic who looks like King Kong Bundy. And by the way, it's not Thomas Prendergast, it's Thomasina Prendergast. I don't know why Cuomo appointing you and your predecessor, who looks like Wes Craven, who gave us Freddy Krueger, to lead the MTA, because you're both screwed up, okay, and I got this testimony here to prove it. Let's see what happened so far. November 7, one of you held a public hearing in Brooklyn, even though the weather was bad, and some of the post-Hurricane Sandy service hadn't been restored. Outrageous. You had at least one intermission. How many speakers? Under 20, maybe under 10. November 13, I testified at Hostess College. 2 people I know testified at Brew College. Their attendance was bad. You had at least 2 intermissions. November 15, Sheraton Hotel. I testified there. Their attendance was bad. You had at least 2 intermissions, maybe 3. Okay? That was 2012. Also in 2012, both men, I'm referring to Loader and Prendergast, fired Joseph Masiglio, even though he had to take time off from work for medical reasons. You rehired him, but there's no reason why you fired him. Okay? Let's start this year, March 7. You held a public hearing in Brooklyn, Springfield Educational Campus. The attendance was bad. March 19, the Fordham Library. You held a public hearing. The attendance was bad. And you didn't take my suggestions from those public hearings. April 29, Book and Bower Hall. Public hearing. The attendance was bad. May 1, Clarion Hotel, which is hard to reach. Public hearing. The attendance was bad. You had a smaller room. June 18, here. You had a public hearing. That public hearing looked more like a board. It was a joke. Okay? And this is my closing statement. 2007 was the year I dethroned Peter Calco. 2014 will be the year I dethroned the MTA Police Department.
Oh. Thank you.
There's your report. Enjoy it.
Thank you. Kendall Collins, to be followed by Alvin Ponder.
Good morning. My name is Kendall Collins. I'm representing Transit Forward, the only coalition comprising transit riders and workers in New York. Today we are submitting thousands of signatures collected across the city to ask for the restorations of the B37 and X28 in Brooklyn, the BX26, BX28, and QBX1 in Co-op City, and station agents and booths citywide. For over 3 years, our broad coalition has been leading local grassroots campaigns to restore the MTA's 2010 service cuts across the city. Last year, we worked with the Southwest Brooklyn Transit Improvement Coalition and Assemblyman Bill Colton in a successful campaign to restore the B64 in Southwest Brooklyn. Our organizing model is simple. We marry the issues of everyday riders with those of workers, and we work together to organize members of the community, local businesses, congregations, and elected officials. We are happy to hear that the MTA Board will be voting today to restore some services, like the B37. We are also glad that new improvements will be established throughout the city. But Transit Forward will continue the fight for full restorations and additional service improvements. We, riders, community, and faith organizations, bus and subway workers from TWU Local 100, and elected officials, believe that every New Yorker has a right to quality public transportation. To me, quality public transit means feeling safe on every bus I board and knowing that my driver is also safe. It means not having to worry that I'll be late to work because my subway was canceled. It means knowing that my 88-year-old grandmother will have a reliable way to get into Manhattan and Brooklyn to be with family while her Queens home, which was severely damaged during Hurricane Sandy, is being repaired. Safe, reliable, affordable, and accessible public transportation improves the quality of life in every single community. Public transit is a basic civil right, especially for working-class families who rely on public transit to get to jobs, school, and social services. We are presenting you with thousands of petitions and stories we collected from New Yorkers who face a struggle every day in their attempt to get where you need to go. We hope you will take these into consideration in your decisions about the budget today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alvin Ponder. And then Daniel Wiley.
Good morning. My name is Dr. Alvin Ponder. I am a college educator with an MD. Greetings from Co-op City, President Prendergast, members of the MTA Board. I came here to testify for restored services in Co-op City. I taught for years at BMCC, and I would take the BXM7 all the way down. I might have gotten a little nap before teaching anatomy and physiology. And many of my students also take the bus all the way from the Bronx all the way down to Lower Manhattan. I submit to you that without restoration of services, we will continue to have a decline in the quality of life in Co-op City. We're upset. We have heard that there have been restoration of services in other areas of the city and not in our areas. Well, it doesn't sound too good, but I heard that some of my blue-eyed cousins in Riverdale, they'll get their services restored. But those whose skin has been kissed by the sun in Co-op City are not being treated fairly. And I ask that you treat us fairly. I ask that you improve the quality of life from an economic point of view. If one fare turns into two fares, do the math. I ask medically. I've heard on a couple of the speakers state why medically it would be good to restore the services for men and for women, for the elderly to make it to their doctor appointments, and housing for emergencies, and even culturally. I ask this board to strike a blow for justice and equality. Thank you for letting me share my views with you.
Thank you. Daniel Wiley, and then Angelo Vega, and then John Denny.
Thank you. I'm here representing Congresswoman Velasquez, who couldn't be with you today because she's on the Hill in Washington, but she wanted me to come to deliver her testimony. Good morning, Chairman Prendergast, MTA board members, neighbors, and leaders. Today I speak in solidarity with this community coalition to ask MTA to follow through on doing the right thing. This is reiterating a lot of the good words we heard from Violeta Maya from the Sunset Health Council, Maria Escalera from Lutheran Family Health Center, our colleague Jim Brennan, other colleagues in elected government, Mo Awawada from Uprose, and the B37 Coalition. So I won't belabor it too much. You've heard a lot of this testimony. But we all know that public transportation is a vital service in New York City, and it takes people to work, school, senior centers, and hospitals. It allows them to attend cultural activities, to shop, to volunteer. It's the backbone of our economy and our quality of life. Access to mass transit remains an essential public service that, like other public services, such as schools and fire protection, needs to be maintained. The B37 bus line service in Brooklyn is long overdue to be restored. The elimination of this bus adversely affected the elderly, the disabled, families, youth, and persons with chronic illnesses as they disproportionately relied on the bus to access health services and travel to agencies in downtown Brooklyn. MTA needs to provide access to transit for the elderly, disabled, and wheelchair-bound riders, and it is a shame that the R stations along 4th Avenue in Brooklyn, one of the major transit arteries, provides no elevator service. This makes restoring the B37 bus service along 3rd Avenue nearby all the more vital. In addition, in 2010, the cuts eliminated station agents and booths along the southbound side of the NR train lines, which has compromised safety. We're calling for their restoration as well. And MTA has a duty to restore the safety, ensure the safety of their workers and riders. Moreover, MTA should add G trains and improved R train service and connecting service, especially while their sandy, damaged tunnels are closed for necessary repairs. Today I join my colleagues in urging the MTA Board to do the right thing by restoring the B37 bus in Brooklyn and reopening station booths in the NR lines. Thank you all for your service.
Thank you very much. Angelo Vega. Angelo Vega, then John Denny.
Domestic workers. Good morning. My name is Angelo Vega. I'm a member of the South Bronx Community Congress. South Bronx Community Congress is a coalition of many different organizations and residents of the South Bronx. We work on many issues that affect our local community. In the fall of 2012, it was brought to our attention that an elevator was needed to be reinstated in 149th Street and Grand Concourse train station, where the 2, 4, and 5 train converge. This is also where the Hostos Community College, 149th Street General Post Office, Lincoln Hospital, and Pergones Theater are located and highly utilized by students, adults, seniors, disabled persons throughout the Bronx and the city of New York. We were informed about this need by senior citizens who live nearby the Michelangelo apartment complex. They are frustrated by the lack of an elevator for the seniors and disabled people in their community. So they asked us if we could support them in some way. As a result, we decided to start a petition to gather as many signatures as we could from the community. We got over 750 signatures in just 3 days. This showed us an outcry from the community to reinstall an elevator in 149th Street Grand Concourse. Our members also testified and submitted petitions at the MTA public hearing held in the Bronx at Hostos College on Tuesday, November 13, 2012. We ask that you support our community to ensure that the elevator gets reinstalled at the 149th Street train station. Seniors, disabled persons, pregnant women, parents with strollers have suffered too long by not having the vital services. Some of our members remember when they had the elevator that they could use back in the 80s, but due to the city's financial problems, they claimed that there was no more money to maintain it. We need you to help us change this. Recently, Governor Cuomo gave the MTA an extra $40 million, which some of it could be used to restore this elevator. We also send the Chairman Pendergrass a letter with copies of the 750 petitions last week on Monday, July 14, 2013. We ask that you investigate this very important matter to us in the Bronx so that we can together make sure that our communities are given the services that they deserve. To continue or communicate to this work, on this work, and then to resolve this issue, please, well, I have a letter here that you can contact Julio Munoz.
Could you please
of the
wrap
South
up, please,
Bronx
Mr.
Community
Vega?
Congress. His phone number is 646-222-6696. Thank you very much
Thank
for
you
your
very much.
consideration and cooperation.
John Denny.
I hold in my hand a document judged by an agency, the United Nations, to be a violation of basic human rights. Section 210 of the Taylor Law. In November of 2011, the International Labor Organization of the UN ruled that New York State is in violation of basic principles of international law in keeping this unjust law on its books, and specifically when they applied it against the TWU in 2005. This important ruling by the UN went almost unreported in the press. In fact, the only press report I turned up is a story in the Daily News under the headline, United Nations agency says bus and subway workers had right to strike in 2005. Thank you, Daily News. Where are the so-called friends of labor in the Assembly and the State Senate calling for the repeal of this odious section of the Taylor Law? Why aren't the public sector union leaders trumpeting the fact that they have the right to strike and no corrupt gang in Albany can take it from them? This board has gotten away for over a year and a half with dodging a fair contract for your workers by hiding behind this unjust law, which constitutes a naked theft of the most effective toll workers have, the right to collectively withhold their labor. It's really all they have in their perennial struggle with the boss class to earn a decent living. I'm now going to repair to the men's room and put this odious law to an appropriate use.
Thank you very much. Mark Trejek. Is there a Mark Trejek? Treygeek. Hope I got his name right. Mark, you there?
Does it matter? No.
It's a very tough act to follow. Well, good morning, good afternoon. My name is Mark Traeger. I am with the Southwest Brooklyn Transportation Improvement Coalition. I'm also a teacher. I teach at New Utrecht High School in Southern Brooklyn as well. And I'm here today to, first of all, share with you that our communities in South Brooklyn were, as many of you know, devastated by Hurricane Sandy. There were two cuts made in 2010 that severely impacted our part of Brooklyn. That was the cut to the B64 service, and which I appreciate the board restoring earlier this year, and the X28 weekend service, which services areas in Bensonhurst, Dyker Heights, as well as Seagate. Now, there's been a decision made because of the Sandy recovery that the R train will be suspended beginning in August in parts of Brooklyn. We strongly believe that with the restoration of the X28 on the weekends, that could alleviate some of the burdens done to the areas near Dyker Heights and Bensonhurst. I remind people here on the board that the weekends is not just a recreational time for people. There are people who work on the weekends to make ends meet. There are people who go to classes in Manhattan to further their education, to further their studies. And I also remind you that the other part of the X28 stops is the west end of Coney Island near Seagate. There is a mile gap between the amusement district in Coney Island near Stillwell Avenue by West 12th and by West 37th Street, the west end of Coney Island, where transportation options and services are limited. Please, I urge the board to take a look at Coney Island, parts of Seagate, the west end, not just the cyclone, but the west end. The people there are still trying to recover to a sense of normalcy. And I believe that restoring X28 service is a part of Sandy recovery, and I urge the board to please consider the needs of the families of Southern Brooklyn in Coney Island and in Bensonhurst. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We're going to suspend the public speaking at this time, conduct the business of the board, and come back to the public speaking. It's important we're able to deal with these issues, some of which have to do with service restoration. I'd like to begin today, approval. Before I continue, I want to apologize. We have not introduced, there were two people that were confirmed as board members today. I was up there being confirmed. One was Mitch Pallu, who you already know. The second is John Malloy from Nassau County. Approval of minutes? Second. So moved. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Some brief remarks before we get into the meat of the meeting. Bus driver assaults. You've heard some commentary from some of the public speakers. It's an issue that Joe Loda began his tenure on, and I am as committed as he was, as is the union, to be able to deal with something that is an egregious assault on our own employees. There is no issue more important than protecting our employees no matter where they work. Many of our workers are injured on the job, and any one of those is one too many. And when the injuries result from assaults on bus operators, that is totally unacceptable. They put their lives on the line each and every day, going out, working by themselves in difficult situations, and we need to do more to be able to combat this serious problem. Last year, Governor Cuomo introduced the Transit Watch program to protect MTA workers in the job, and that program offers cash rewards for information leading to the arrest and conviction of offenders. More than 1,300 buses now have protective partition barriers, and by the end of the year, 1,500 buses will have security cameras. And virtually every new bus we order will have partitions and be wired for camera technology. We're working with the TW's Bus Operator Action Committee. Frank Austin is a member of that committee to come up with new and innovative ways to address the problem. And we're providing ongoing training to bus operators how to circumvent conflict and diffuse hostile situations. We don't ask them, nor do we want to put them in a situation where they challenge someone and it results in an assault. We're going to keep our thinking creatively and working as hard as we can to reach our ultimate goal, which is to have no employees assaulted while on the job. Because an assault on any one of our employees is assault on us all. Lastly, the capital program amendment. Later in this meeting, we will be asking for your approval for an amendment to our current capital program, which runs through the end of 2014. I think most of you saw Monday's Finance Committee presentation about the amendment and its 3 key points, but I'd like to re-elaborate those. First, we achieved a $2 billion savings and through efficiencies in the full 5-year plan from 2010 to 2014, without impacting benefits or eliminating the projects that are essential to the growth and state of good repair projects for the region. This amendment details how we're implementing those efficiencies on a project-by-project basis. Second, the amendment adds $5.8 billion to the program for what we call mitigation work, beyond just restoring the system to the place it was the day before Sandy and actually taking it to the next level to harden it for future storm occurrences that we will know will occur in the region. There will be in addition to the $4.7 billion for repairs, repairing the system to the way it was the day before the storm. We expect the mitigation work to be funded mostly through reimbursements from the federal government, and building on Governor Cuomo's leadership, as evidenced in the Infrastructure 2100 report. These include projects protecting everything from trains and buses to stations, tunnels, rail yards, and as well as projects to make our transportation network that much more resilient. Third, the amendment updates the capital program for Capital Program Review Board review and approval in accordance with the obligations under the Public Authorities Law. As you can see by the scope of the agenda today, we have plenty of work ahead of us, and once again, I'm honored to lead the board in facing the challenging and opportunistic times ahead for the MTA. Committee on Finance, Mr. Sador.
Finance Committee met this month and reports the following. There are 4 action items this month. The 2010-2014 Capital Plan Amendment. The first action item is to obtain MTA Board approval of an amendment to the 2010-2014 Capital Plan, which makes project-level adjustments reflecting the full funding of the plan approved by the MTA Board on December the 21st, 2011. And B, adds projects totaling $5.77 billion for agency mitigation initiatives identified in the wake of Superstorm Sandy. MTA Board authorization is also sought to submit the Capital Program Review Board covered plan amendments to the CPRB for consideration and approval. The committee recommends this action item, and I move it.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
So moved.
Number 2, the authorization to modify swap agreements. The second action item is to obtain board approval of a resolution to authorize the MTA, New York City Transit, and Bridges and Tunnels as needed from time to time to enter into an amendment of all existing internal swap dealers association Inc. master agreements and make elections regarding the ISDA master agreements and related swap transactions as a result of the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act of 2010 and the ISDA protocol. Staff to execute any and all desirable or appropriate agreements to effectuate such amendments and elections, and C, to ratify prior reactions related thereto. The committee recommends this action item, and I move it.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
So moved.
Number 3, the Transportation Revenue Anticipation Notes. The third action item is to obtain MTA Board authorization of the necessary documentation and activities to issue revenue anticipation notes on the Transportation Revenue Resolution to provide for short-term liquidity of up to $350 million and to approve the delegation of authority to take action to effectuate such transactions. The notes will be used from time to time and may be repaid and reissued to address potential unanticipated operating fund need. The committee recommends this item, and I move it.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye. Number 4, the Transportation Revenue Commercial Paper Program. The fourth action item is to obtain MTA authorization of necessary documentation to issue up to $350 million of transportation revenue bond anticipation notes to be issued in the form of commercial paper to finance existing approved transit and commuter capital projects. Authorization is also being requested for a long-term financing to permanently finance such CP3 from time to time, including accrued interest thereon. The committee recommends this action, and I move it.
Second.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
There are 7 procurement actions this month in a total amount of $1.049 million. There are 6 competitive procurements in the amount of $1.028 million. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
There is 1 ratification in a total amount of $21,000. The committee recommends this ratification, and I move it.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
There are no non-competitive procurements this month. There are 20 real estate action items, which include the items described in the Board Action Items book distributed for this meeting, as well as the all-agency naming rights policy, which is an accompanying handout. The committee recommends these real estate items, and I move them.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Transit and Bus Committee, Mark LeBeau.
Congratulations, Mr. Chairman, on your permanent appointment. The Subway and Bus Committee met this month and reports the following. There's 1 action item. It's for the board to approve the renewal of retainer agreements with the Transit Adjudication Bureau's current panel of 2 senior hearing officers, each in an amount not to exceed $35,000 for the period August 1, 2013 through December 31, 2013. The committee recommends this action item, and I move it.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
There are 24 procurement actions totaling $397.4 million. There are 3 non-competitive procurements for MTA New York City Transit in the total amount of $3 million. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye. There are 11 competitive procurements, 7 for MTA New York City Transit and 4 for MTA Capital Construction Company, in the total amount of $356.7 million. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
And there are 10 ratifications, 6 for MTA New York City Transit and 4 for MTA Capital Construction Company, meaning a total amount of $37.7 million. The committee recommends these ratifications, and I move them.
Discussion? All those in favor?
This concludes subways and buses.
Metro North Railroad Committee, Mr. Sador.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. The Metro North Committee met this month and reports the following. There are 12 procurement actions in a total amount of $18.3 million. There is 1 non-competitive procurement in the amount of $600,000. The committee recommends this procurement, and I move it.
Second. Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
There are 8 competitive procurements in a total amount of $13.1 million. The committee recommends this procurement, and I move it.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
There are 3 ratifications in total amount of $4.6 million. The committee recommends these ratifications, and I move them.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
This concludes our report.
Long Island Railroad Committee, Mr. Pelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There are 11 procurement actions in the total amount of $52.9 million. There are 9 competitive procurements, 4 for Long Island Railroad and 5 for the MTA Capital Construction Company, in the total amount of $23.7 million. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye. There are 2 ratifications for the MTA Capital Construction Company, in the total amount of $29.2 million. The committee recommends these ratifications, and I move them.
Second.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
There are no non-competitive procurements, and this concludes the report of the Long Island Railroad Committee.
Bridges and Tunnels Committee, Mr. Alan Capelli.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also offer my congratulations to you and to the governor on a terrific appointment.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, the Bridges and Tunnels Committee met this month and report the following. 23 procurements in the total amount of $26.7 million. There's one non-competitive procurement in the total amount of $500,000. Committee recommends these procurements, and I move them.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye. There are 15 competitive procurements in the total amount of $22.7 million. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
And there are 7 ratifications in the total amount of $3.5 million. The committee recommends these ratifications, and I move them.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
This concludes Bridges and Tunnels report. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
This month's Corporate Governance Committee was chaired by Vice Chairman Fernando Ferrer, and he'll give this report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Corporate Governance Committee met this month and reports the following. There are 3 action items. The first is to amend the MTA and agency bylaws, committee charters, and MTA governance guidelines to change the board's meeting schedule to provide for meetings at least 11 times per year effective January 1, 2014. The committee recommends this action item, and I move it.
Any discussion? Mr. Capelli?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to commend this board for, A, taking the effort last year to try something different, which I think was an important step to meet the needs of both the agencies, the board, and the public, and for then recognizing that there were some difficulties in practicality with doing it and deciding to, in fact, remedy that. So I think that the flexibility that this board showed was important in serving the public, and I support the motion.
Thank you. Mr. Albert?
I'd like to echo Alan's comments and say that I thought the previous schedule didn't offer the public enough input, and the schedule was unpredictable because it was every 6 weeks. It wasn't even the same time of each month. So in that regard, I think the return to the former schedule is a great move and shows the board is flexible.
Mr. Merdler?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to congratulate both you and Vice Chairman Ferrer for taking steps to return transparency and openness and to provide the public and the media with the information to which they are entitled, and I thank you.
Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor?
Aye. Mr. Chairman, the second action item is to obtain board authorization to revise the all-agency procurement guidelines and the all-agency guidelines for procurement of services by increasing the minimum threshold for change orders that may be approved without board action to expedite the approval process for change orders. The proposal in the staff summary has been amended at the Governance Committee to further provide that agencies will report to CPOC as information items those change orders approved by the agency presidents under the new thresholds that are in amounts over $250,000 or that are over $50,000 if the change order exceeds 15% of the adjusted contract value. The committee recommends that this action item, and I move it.
Any discussion?
A question?
Mr. Albert?
Does this mean that the CPOC committee will get notified of these and just won't have the opportunity to vote on them? Is that correct?
As I understand it, we will submit for information purposes the change orders that have been executed by the agency presidents, so they'll be able to see the nature and the frequency that those are being granted. And now we're raising the limit to 750. Yes. Is that correct, Nuria?
Thank you.
Any further comments? All those in favor?
To Jim Blair.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Blair.
Thank you. Congratulations to both Chairman Prendergast and Freddie. I think that this change is long overdue. I think that there is adequate oversight and at the operational staff level for matters like this, and I wholeheartedly support it.
Any further comment? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, the final action item is for the board to authorize a revision to the all-agency travel and business expense policy. The committee unanimously recommends that the board authorize this action item, and I move it.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Mr. Chairman, that concludes the report of the Corporate Governance Committee.
Before we hear on the July financial plan and a report from Bob Ferran, the Chief Financial Officer, I'd like to make a few comments so I could provide a context under which this presentation is being made. First, one of the key takeaways of the plan is that it increases our emphasis on long-term costs like pensions, retiree health care, paratransit, and debt service, areas that for many years have been viewed as being beyond our control, because those expenses continue to increase rapidly and faster than the rate of inflation. At the same time, our discretionary costs, the costs we can control and have controlled, are projected to increase just 1.6% every year from 2013 through 2017, exactly on pace with the Consumer Price Index. And we have been successful in holding these costs in check by fundamentally overhauling the way we do business. That's something that started before me. It goes back at least 2 administrations, and it's something I'm committing to we will not lose sight of. Last year, we cut $700 million out of our annual operating budget, and we're on track to increase that amount of these annual reductions to $1.3 billion by 2017 every single year. The plan also reflects MTA's commitment to add or restore service whenever sustainable in the form of revenues to be able to support those services. And it was made clear at public hearings last fall, members of the public experienced real hardship after service was cut in 2010. Many of us heard those at the time the public hearings were held. We've heard it at meetings like this, and we heard it certainly today. Yet sustainability is the key because new and restored services adds ongoing expense to the budget. I do not want to be part of a process as leading this agency that will restore service only to have to come back and ask you to cut that service the next year. That's not responsible. For that reason, in order to determine the appropriate amount of this year's package, I consider the financial plan as a whole rather than looking at specific revenue or expense lines, as some do, and naturally. We need to look at the context of all the puts and takes, all the revenues and costs, and make the decision in that context. This year, while we've seen some revenues come in lower than expected, I'm pleased to report we've also seen increased revenues from subsidies and dedicated taxes, including increased state aid from Governor Cuomo's executive budget. And having considered the entire financial package, including our own unprecedented cost-cutting efforts, we are proposing a package of new investments that would improve both the frequency and the quality of the services we offer and the experience the customers see on a daily basis. The plan calls for investing millions of dollars in new service on our subway, bus, and commuter rail lines, and it makes service even better with more station cleanings, improved communication, and new investments in technology. Bottom line is that I'm thrilled that one of my first acts as chairman is that hopefully we will bring all of this to our customers. At the end of the day, that's what it's all about, our customers and the services we deliver to them. You're only as good as your last rush hour, you're only as good as your last storm, but each and every day the customers measure our experience and how well we're doing. And now with that context, I'd like to ask Bob Ferran to go through the presentation briefly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In front of each of you, you have 4 items. You have a staff summary that describes what we'll be discussing today, and also there is an action item that the chairman will present to you at the end of this presentation. You have Volume 1 and Volume 2 of the July plan. Volume 1 is the executive summary, which highlights the changes to the July plan. Volume 2 has all of the details by agency of those. And then you have a hard copy of the presentation that we will be presenting here on the screen. Since July 2010, the MTA's plans have been disciplined, consistent, and transparent. They might be a little boring in that we try to follow the same format each time, but I think it makes it easier to understand what has changed and what we're doing. This July plan is, again, disciplined, consistent, and transparent, and it reflects the 3 key elements in every prior plan. First, it entails annual recurring cost reductions. This year we'll hit over $800 million of recurring cost savings, and as the chairman mentioned, the target is $1.3 billion by 2017. And the commitment that we've made is that our budgets will not include any budget-driven service cuts since those that we had to enact in 2010. It includes 3 years of net zeros for our union workers. And let me remind you of the net zero. We are happy to provide wage increases for our represented workers, but those wage increases have to be paid for by verifiable work concessions, contributions to health care, or pension plans. I would point out that the management, the non-union workers, are already into their 5th year of hard zero wage growth, 4.5 years. So they have already taken 50% more than the ask that we're making to our union workers. And finally, biennial fare and toll increases as planned. And the key here for me, as the Chief Financial Officer, is biennial. We need to have regular, predictable fare and toll increases that, again, will be presented to the public in public hearings, and the board will make a decision before anything is implemented. The commitment in every plan is to add or restore service whenever it's sustainable. We want to preserve and enhance our funding for the capital programs. And an emphasis from Chairman Prendergast is to start trying to really address the long-term costs that we have, such as pensions, retiree health care, paratransit, and debt service, which previously have been considered uncontrollable. And why do we have this increased emphasis? Well, if you look at these uncontrollable costs, you'll see that they're growing faster than inflation and faster than our controllable expenditures. Between the period of 2013 and 2017, our forecast period, if you look at the annual compounded growth rate, CPI during this period is projected to be 1.6. As the chairman said, our controllable expenses, personnel service and other than personal service, is growing at the same rate, 1.6. But the uncontrollable expenses are growing almost 4 times that rate, 6.1%. And if you look at key areas, you can see the growth. Now, pensions we're projecting now will only be 1.1% growth, but that's because we've had a significant run-up. Between 2011 and 2012, we had more than 19% increase in our pension cost. And there's reasons that this growth is less, but the number is still a very large number, and it affects our budget. Employee and retiree health care, more than 9%. Energy, almost 4%. Paratransit, our fastest growing area, over 9%. And I should point out a couple of things about paratransit. Paratransit is an important service that we provide to our customers, but it is also the most heavily subsidized service that we provide. In fact, the subsidy that we provide right now is comparable to the subsidy that we provide to Metro North Railroad. We have been trying to address these costs in 2 ways. Make sure that we're providing the service to eligible registrants, and also make sure that we can reduce our unit cost. And I would say that to date, since 2010, when we've really started focusing on these costs, we have cut $255 million of annual recurring costs out of that budget. And we're on track to do even more. And then debt service, a significant component, 7.3%. So let's just go back and review where we were in February. In the February plan, even assuming the recurring cost cuts, even assuming the net zeros and the biennial fare and toll increases, we were showing deficits through 2016 of $325 million. What we were projecting for this year was a $48 million operating balance, or surplus, if you will, that would roll over, as we always do, to address the deficit in 2014 and reduce it down to $77 million. We were projecting a small deficit of $21 million in 2015, and then a $227 million deficit in 2016. So what's changed between the February plan and now? Well, there's been some puts and takes, as the chairman said. The favorable reestimates and other changes: first, higher real estate-related taxes, primarily the urban tax, which is collected in the city of New York. When we went through and re-estimated what we thought the revenues would be during this forecast period, we felt that the revenues would probably be about $35 million a year higher than what we had in the February plan. However, the revenues in this year look to be about $115 million higher. And that really relates to 4 significant transactions that have already occurred this year, where we received $80 million higher than our baseline forecast. And we'll talk about what we think should be done with that money later. We're projecting higher toll revenues. We're projecting lower pension costs. And the lower pension costs there really reflect primarily actions taken relating to New York City's employee retirement system, which covers most of our employees. There were a number of changes that the actuary put in place. We assumed that those changes would be reflected, very quickly into the increased pension expenses. He has chosen to spread those changes over a 22-year period. So it's reducing the immediate impact of things that are real changes to the long-term liability. Lower health and welfare cost, lower energy cost, additional paratransit savings. Again, we have savings even greater than we projected in the February plan. Reduced debt service from refinancings that we've put in place, and reduced spending really at the end of 2012, which increased the cash carryover balance. Unfavorable changes: lower payroll mobility tax, lower petroleum business tax, about $51 million lower than what we had projected. Lower fare revenues, about $23 million. I think we were perhaps too optimistic in thinking that the economy would improve sooner than it will. Increased insurance costs, and this really reflects Sandy. We now are operating in an environment where we have half the coverage that we had last year, but we have 2.5 times the premium that we paid last year. Obviously, Metro North derailment cost, about $10 million. And then there's the operating buildup cost of the mega projects that are starting to come online. We're talking about Fulton Transit Center, we're talking about the number 7 extension, 2nd Avenue Subway Phase 1, and East Side Access. In 2014, we'll see about $16 million of additional operating expenses. By the time we get to the end of the forecast period, 2017, we will see $190 million of additional operating expenses. But if you take all the puts and takes together, the bottom line is net favorable. So there was much talk about how much service could we add. And as we were trying to determine the level of service, there were several things that we kept in mind. First, adding service means we're adding ongoing expenses, and the funding must be sustainable. The worst thing we could possibly do is add service and then have to take it back. The amount of the service, as the chairman said, has to be evaluated in the context of our overall budget. You can't just say, well, we got this much more in revenue or we have this much more less in a particular expense. It has to be taken as part of the whole budget. And the amount that we add really does have to be meaningful so the customers can see it. And it can't be so large that, again, we can't make that commitment to sustain it. So let's talk about the highlights of the July plan. It's adding $18 million of service and customer enhancements. And that's in addition to $11.5 million of additional service that were provided, primarily driven by our guidelines. And then there's another $11 million of customer enhancements that we're putting in place beginning in 2014. We are investing $76 million in important new operational and maintenance needs. We're including $80 million annually in pay-as-you-go capital beginning in 2015 as an additional down payment to the 2015 to 2019 capital program. You can imagine that the 15 to 19 capital program, which will be presented to you in September of next year, should be probably as large, if not larger, than the current capital program, base capital program. And the funding there is going to be significant in terms of its needs. So putting money aside here we think makes sense. And it's primarily funded with debt service savings that we've had from refundings this year, our estimates of lower interest rates, and our cash flow requirements. The basic principle here is if we're saving money in the capital side, we want to reinvest that money back into the next capital program. We're increasing our contribution for retiree health care, the OPEB contribution. The unfunded liability is $17.8 billion. We are putting away a little bit extra money, about $3 to $26 million a year over the financial plan. We have a general reserve that we build into our budget, and the general reserve is sized at 1% of our operating expenses. And that general reserve is there so that if we have unexpected expenses, if we have unexpected revenue shortfalls, we have something that we can draw on. It was what we used to help offset the losses that we incurred from Hurricane Sandy last year. It is very important. But again, following the chairman's emphasis on trying to reduce these long-term costs, what we'd like to propose is, to the extent any of that money is still available at the end of our fiscal year, that we would use that money, one-shot money, if you will, to apply it against some of these long-term costs, the pension cost, OPEBs, the pay-as-you-go or debt retirement, all to just reduce annual expenses. And in doing so, we'll minimize the pressure on fares and tolls. One thing that I missed going through here, and it's very important, remember I said that the real estate revenues coming in about $115 million higher than the February plan this year, or $80 million more than we think should be built into our baseline budget. We'd like to apply that to our most underfunded pension plan. It's the Long Island Railroad Additional Pension Plan. That plan covers a number of employees, most of whom former employees retired, some are still working, but it's only 27% funded. It's a $1.2 billion unfunded liability. If we apply the $80 million toward that unfunded liability, it will save us $6 million a year in contributions. So to us, that's a better investment than we can get anywhere else, and it makes sense to save money long term. So with these reestimates, with these new initiatives, the July plan still projects out-year deficits, but of only $240 million, lower than the February plan. So let's walk it through. Where this year in 2013, we had expected to have a $48 million operating balance. We're now projecting a $141 million operating balance. But as always, that balance gets rolled forward to apply against deficits in the next year. And so we'll end up with a slight surplus of $6 million projected for next year, basically a break even. We're projecting a deficit of $49 million in 2015, $91 million in 2016, and $100 million in 2017. Every time we present this plan, we have out-year deficits. And if you really look at the out-year deficits without any actions taken, you'll see that those deficits just continue to grow. And they're growing largely because of what we mentioned earlier, these uncontrollable costs growing at a rate 3.5 to 4 times the inflation rate. So if you looked at the deficits embedded in our plan prior to any of those 3 key elements that we talked about, the recurring cost savings, the net zeros, or the fare and toll increases, this is what you would see. A $1.2 billion deficit in 2014 and a $2.7 billion deficit by 2017. But let's see how the management actions address the issues. So with the recurring cost reductions, $948 million is what we project to have on savings next year. As the chairman said, growing to $1.3 billion by the time you get to 2017. Those initiatives close 58% of our combined cumulative budget deficit. Then there's the fare and toll increases projected for 2015 and 2017. We'll put those in place March 1st, according to the financial plan, in both of those years. On an annualized basis, we're looking at a $500 million fare and toll increase in 2015 that would generate $424 million in cash that year, and a $550 million annualized toll increase in 2017 that would generate $469 million that year. Those fare and toll increases, if implemented, would help close 24% of the deficit. And the last measure is the net zeros that we're asking for from our represented workers. Those net zeros would provide a benefit in 2014 of about $274 million, up to $303 by the time we get to 2017. But I'd point out that those net zeros, again, which are subject to collective bargaining, would only close 15% of the deficits. So you can see right there what are the relative contributions from the stakeholders here. We are cutting costs across the board. That's closing about 58%. Fares and tolls would close about 24%. And the net zeros will close about 15% to the extent we can get them in place. To the extent any of these things aren't realized, the deficits will increase and will have to be addressed from some other source. So the MTA is continuing to follow the plan that we basically have had in place since 2010, but risks remain. Again, as I just mentioned, the most important risk are the execution of the financial strategy, getting the net zeros, having the cost savings, and then fare and toll increases. I'd point out that to the extent that we have a loss or reduction in the payroll mobility tax or any other tax or subsidy that we receive without replacement, it just creates a hole that will have to be addressed. There's economic uncertainty. The national economy remains weak, and our local economy, while improving, it's improving on a very uneven basis. There's a question about what kind of federal support can we expect, both on our ongoing capital program because sequestration, and also just about the repair and resiliency funding, the availability of that to us, particularly on the resiliency side where it's a competitive process and we are competing with other parties in this region. The longer-term vulnerabilities are the increasing operating costs for these mega projects that are coming on board. To the extent that ridership does not increase significantly, these costs are just going to increase the relative burden on all of our customers. There's the funding for the 2015 to 2019 capital program. We now realize the casualty risk that we're exposed to in the system from peril. Retiree health care as always, pension as always, and then to me an important element is building and maintaining critical financial reserves. We need money in the bank so that we can be prepared for the unexpected. And again, I will just point out we spend probably $250 to $275 million a week, which means with the $1 billion roughly that we have in the bank in our operating account, we really have less than a month cash balance or operating expenses in the bank, and we need to make sure we have adequate liquidity. So with that, I would open it up for any questions you might have.
Mr. Chairman, I will vote for this plan, but I do have to make a point that I am constrained to make. And that is, my view continues to be that the working men and women of the MTA are entitled both to a contract that is fair and reasonable, and that the underrepresented or unrepresented workers are finally entitled to a raise. I recognize that it is time, that it is a difficult task to find money to achieve those results. And I know that you and the chairman and the vice chairman have done everything humanly possible to move in that direction. My point is to urge you to do more, and to urge you to do that which I know you desire to achieve, and that is to provide the kind of labor harmony that is needed in this and every other agency of the city and state, and I thank you.
Mr. Capelli.
Mr. Chairman, congratulations not only on your appointment as we've discussed earlier, but also bringing forth what I believe is a prudent, sensible plan that continues the efforts that we made last year to provide sustained service and to respond, as you said before, to the pain of people that we heard at the hearings and that we've heard at our board meetings, and as we hear as we go around the district, people who are desperately relying upon us to meet their needs. This is not an easy task, and as we look at, and those of us who watch the numbers weekly, monthly, as they come in, as the various categories go up and down, it's a challenging situation, and many of the costs that come our way are unexpected. As insurance costs go up because there's a storm, and we lose another 30 or 40 or 50 million dollars, and in the blink of an eye, savings that we thought we had, we don't have. And so, we need to be prudent and make sure that we never go back to a situation where we're forced to cut service. So I applaud that effort of you. I can't say that there's everything in here that I would want. In fact, there's not, but I also realize that that's not realistic. There are lots of things out there that we need to continue to do. We are taking care of a lot of things in a lot of places, so there's an element of something for everybody in this, and I think it's been pretty fairly distributed between modes of service and regions of the state so that we're sharing the benefits in a fair and equitable fashion, as there are needs that we can't meet to the total extent in everywhere. So you have fashioned a plan that is consistent with the motion that I made, seconded by Mitch Paley to add money in for restorations for a variety of services, and just in terms of the direct service itself and the kind of amenities that we have not been able to place in terms of security and quality of life and cleanliness of stations and signage and a whole potpourri of things that are going to make the ride better for commuters. So I would say that this motion incorporates the spirit and the intent of the motion that I made, and I intend to vote for it. So thank you so much, Mr. Chairman.
Any other comments? I'd like to make one before we have a motion. The work that was generated to end up in Bob's presentation came from not only the MTA headquarters budget folks, but from the agencies themselves. When it comes to service issues, they feel and listen to what the customers say, not just at the public hearings, but when we get the responses as we implement some of those service changes, and some of them were cuts. You heard a number of comments today from people from Co-op City, and I want to be clear to you that I was at some of those meetings with them, and they were some of the most agreeable people in terms of understanding where we were back in 2010 and the need to make some of the changes, and they worked with us. And while some of the changes we made may have addressed problems, we clearly have an outstanding problem there. And it's one that uniquely needs to be looked at because of the challenges it presents. It's a very large customer generator. It's got some unique needs, and the commitment to do a study, much like we've done, and you've seen some of it with the G line, where we do an in-depth review from an operations planning standpoint, taking a look at all the factors and coming up with a plan to address the problems we are committing to doing, and we're committing to do it in a very fast time frame. It's my intent to have that study done as soon as possible so that it can help guide a decision for the budget that we will bring forward in November to be acted on in December of this year. And it may be a challenge to operations planning, but that's the challenge I'm giving them. Bob? I'm sorry, Andrew?
I'm obviously, if I had a vote, I would vote for this. Every service increase or improvement from the disastrous June of 2010 service cuts have not been restored yet. There were some that I enumerated at some of the meetings that we had this week that I would prefer to see sooner rather than later. I understand there's reasons why these can't happen. I just also call attention to the biennial fare and toll increases. As I stated, maybe it was 2 months ago, if we do that and it's a 7.5% yield every other year, at some point we're going to have commutation fares of $800 a month and tolls of $40 a month, and whether that's sustainable or not and whether people will continue to use our system in the numbers predicted by Bill Wheeler is anybody's guess. People are price sensitive, and I would hope that we would take these fare and toll increases to the state and show them where they eventually lead if we don't get relief in some other areas, and maybe that can prune some of those increases if the Assembly and the Senate realize that. On the issue, and Mr. Merdler has brought it up before, the paratransit costs. Obviously, everybody is entitled to transportation in our city. It's a vital service. It's a service that I'm not sure the MTA ought to be paying as much as we're paying for. I think if it's an important service, which we all acknowledge it is, the municipalities and the federal government should be paying for this, not a particular transit agency. And obviously, because we're the biggest, we have the highest costs. So that's contributing sizably to our deficit. As Bob mentioned, it's akin to the subsidy for Metro North, and I think at some point we have to examine these costs. Obviously, it's an important service, has to be continued. It's just who ends up paying for it. So I applaud the job that was done here, and hopefully we'll see more of these kinds of improvements, sustainable improvements in the future.
Thank you. This is being presented to you today for information only. As you know, in November, we will reflect whatever has changed between this time and November, reflect the operations at each of the agencies, reflect new need requests, and we'll present a preliminary budget to you in November. You'll have time then to consider it and review it before we'll ask you to vote on the final budget in December. But we do need an action today. And the action is to seek board authorization for the publishing of any required notices and the holding of any public hearings necessary or appropriate in connection with those service investments that require a public hearing and that have been presented to you today.
Any discussion on that item? All those in favor? Aye. That concludes the business portion of the meeting. I don't believe we have an executive session, do we? So may I have a motion to, well, we want to go back to the public speakers at this point for anybody who can stay and hear the remainder of them. So, Mr. Morello, if you could.
I must have missed those. No, he did it. But we didn't do the one that they withdrew, the policy. No, we didn't name it. Yeah. Thank you.
Yes, yes,
That we
yes.
wanted to do.
Yes, yes.
But it's only a friendly thing.
Good job. Good job.
I think we've been joined by a number of public speakers who had been in the holding room downstairs. So we'll pick up where we left off. Bernard Silich, or Silich, C-Y-L-I-C-H. Mr. Silich. He'll be followed by Hattie Overman.
Good morning, board members. Still good morning. I too. I'm Bernard Silich. I'm elected member of the Riverboat Board of Directors. I'm also a member of the coalition, Co-op City Coalition Against Budget Cuts, the MTA cuts, that is. Excuse me? Yes. Let me just remind you that I've addressed this body on numerous occasions since 2010 when you instituted those draconian cuts that affects Co-op City and, of course, the rest of the city. And, of course, I addressed the issue that these cuts were irrational, unjustifiable, and unconscionable, affecting our community. And I see that it has echoed here in the board reports here today. Now, I hear that the board is considering conducting some 5-month survey of the services in Co-op City. I just want to remind the board that in 2010, following the cuts at a rally of standing room only, MTA representative informed us that the MTA is going to conduct a 6-month survey of the effects of those cuts. Well, I don't know what kind of a survey was conducted and what kind of results there were, but we have results. And the results over a 3-year period is that those cuts are egregious and they are unsustainable, and they, in spite of the fact that you have 7 bus lines in Co-op City going crisscrossing the community, and yet has not replaced the adequately met the needs of the cuts that you had instituted. So I appeal to you that you need to reconsider that. And we have, in fact, presented to you last year, exactly last year, the results of those surveys of our community. 5,000 cooperatives, riders, signed a petition that we submitted to you last year, and again we submitted another additional 3,000 petition to restore those cuts. Just one more remark, if I may, and that is in regard to the net zero, in regard to the budget, net zero effect of the MTA workers. That's not net zero, really, folks. It's not net zero. It's a cut. It's a cut in their income because inflation goes up. That's not net zero. So I think you need to reconsider that and really consider the demand that we need to restore those cuts. By the way, we have if you sit down with us, we can find your savings in Co-op City if you do in regard to the bus service. But evidently we have offered to meet with you, but nobody has accepted that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hattie Overman, and then Stuart Edwards.
Good morning to the board. First of all, I want to thank you for mentioning Co-op City, that you will consider doing a survey of Co-op City. Okay, now we as the residents, the working people, students, seniors, and those with disabilities are again asking that you restore the bus BX26, BX28, and crew BX1 buses to meet the vital needs of the community. I would like to convey the needs and proposed solutions are planned to meet the needs of Co-op City. Now, vital situation is to eliminate the hardship of people having to pay 2 fares or more to reach the subway. We also are concerned about the people that work at night. They sometimes end up walking home at late hours of the night because the buses are not running. I also would like to convey that the BX26, BX28, these 2 buses at this time does not take people home in their own community. We have to transfer to another bus just to get home in our own community. I also would like to convey that the QBX1 bus was replaced by the Q50 limited bus. However, this bus only travel on the outside section of Co-op City, and more often we also have to wait 30 minutes or more for a bus to go to Pelham Bay to the subway. I also would like to say that we should we understand, so let me hurry up, I got to get to the important part. We should expect the restoring of the bus. These buses are the lifeline of our community because we live in a 2-fare zone that moving residents every day to work, school, shopping, and other appointments. I also like to remind you also that Co-op City now also has one of the largest malls that's being built in the community, and certainly restoring the buses will be vital in the growth of the economy by providing quality services to the customers. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Stuart Edwards. And then Kermit Saltis.
Good afternoon to the board and to all the other members that's here. I want to say that I found, as a person who is active in the community, a retiree, I've been living there, Co-op City, for 42 years, and as I continue to ask people and talk to them about the change in the bus service in 2010, and over the 3 years I've heard very sad stories about what they're going through. The people who work, for example, who cannot, come here today because they're at work. And I'm speaking for some of them, and they say that they have to walk sometimes 5 and 6 blocks to go to work on the 11 o'clock shift at night because some of the buses stop running at a certain time. I think the BX38 stops running at a certain time, and then they have to walk a long way to get to it. So what I'm saying here is that this change has been very inconvenient to the people who work, and also to the people like myself who are retired, who we have to go to meetings in other parts of Co-op City. The bus service, where they got it set up, has divided the community so that we can't get to meet, to carry out meetings, to carry out activities, to vote, because we live in a co-op. We do vote, and we have to meet in order to vote. So there's all kinds of things like that. Shopping center makes it difficult for us. But sometimes, like a friend of mine, they have to take like 3 buses. That's 2 fares they have to pay in order to get to work on a daily basis. We're talking about 5 days a week. We're talking about for the whole month. That adds up to a lot of money. So what I'm saying is a lot of people being handicapped, and I don't like the idea of the way they treat the people who ride the accessory ride. And I have to be concerned about that because someday I might become handicapped, And not only because I'm concerned because it's people that's involved. So I want to say I hope you take this into consideration. I want to thank you for allowing me to speak. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Kermit Saltis, and then Vaughn Brooks. Mr. Saltis, good.
Gentlemen, how do you do? By way of introduction, my name is Kermit Saltis. I'm retired from Mabstoa. I'm addressing specifically this to you, Mr. Prendergast, and to the board members. Number one, we are in a desperate situation, not for Co-op City, but as an exodus route from the city itself in the event of an emergency evacuation. You cut services, you have to be careful at the time, place, and the availability of equipment. Now, we have a couple of bus terminals in the vicinity, but that doesn't mean a thing when you need an emergency service. Now, let me clarify what I'm talking about. I'm an operations manager. I came up through the ranks. My former service was with all bankrupt companies, and my job was appointed by Dr. Ronan, his initial predecessor. We went down, spoke to the then chairman, Dr. Ronan, and what happened was this. We lodged a complaint about the hiring policies. As a result, Dr. Ronan assigned Dean Mulligan, I think he was the dean of the law school at Fordham. Dr. Roscoe Brown of the Tuskegee Airmen was on the committee, and there was another gentleman named Sidney Malick. Dr. Brown and Sidney Malick at the time were on the staff of New York University, I believe it was. Okay. He appointed a committee, and as a result, we had to get together, and he asked me, not necessarily personally, but through an emissary, to elaborate on procedures for giving proper tests for bus operators. As a result, you had the MTA Examining Board. Okay, now let's cut to the chase. You required all these bus companies in the last, I'd say last 10, 15 years. The last 5 bus companies were from private entities. One before that was the only one that was assigned to me. I was in charge of Division 1. That was where the World Trade Center and all the local Manhattan, I was Division 1 is a Manhattan bus operations. Division 2 is the Bronx. Okay, now let me clarify what I'm talking about. In case anybody gets curious, wants to get cute, and exchange information, I'll be very happy to elaborate on it in detail.
We still have a long number of speakers ahead of us, Mr. Saltis. Could you please conclude?
You do, but you took up all the time talking about some pie-in-the-sky philosophies. Give me some time, too, because we're talking business right now. Now, Mr. Pendergast, here's what it is. My suggestion to you, rather than make accusations that might offend a lot of people, I would like very much to meet you personally in private with any board members that want to be present at private meetings so that we can thrash this out. And when I say thrash it out, determine emergency evacuation plans for the perimeter of Co-op City. If you look carefully, the whole MTA board is restricted from egressing from the city. If you look at it, what have you got? Queens Midtown Tunnel, you got the Tri-Bowl Bridge, you've got the Frog's Neck Bridge, Whitestone Bridge, you got the...
Mr. Saltis, we'll set up a meeting. We'll set up a meeting.
Would you do that?
Yes, sir.
Me that. But I'd like the police commissioner, fire commissioner. No, this isn't grandstanding. We're talking in confidence, and some of the things that I have to elaborate on are operational impediments that could cripple the system if they're not watched for carefully. Now,
Thank
can
you,
I have
sir.
a commitment on that?
We'll set up a meeting, sir. We will.
Okay? All right, fine. Thank you.
I remember you from
Thank you very much.
I remember you from before, Kermit. We used to work together.
How about...
by the way, I have a vascular problem in my legs, so when you see me hobbling like this, I'm one of the handicapped, and I might get a little nasty for picking on me for the disability problem.
We don't want that. Vaughn Brooks, please. Is Mr. Brooks here? If not, Ira Hirschcraft? Ready to go.
Good afternoon, everybody. Ira Hirschcraft from Co-op City. Mr. Patterson, good to see you. Fernando Ferrer, good to see you. I remember when you were running for mayor and everything like that. Mr. Pendergast, welcome. First of all, the 28th line and the 38th line. 38th line does not mix in Co-op City for one reason. That bus goes to Bay Plaza, from Gun Hill Road to Bay Plaza, okay, from Bay Bridge to Bay Plaza. That bus does not fit into the 28th line. 28th line used to go all the way around Co-op City to the loops. And the 26th line used to go all the way around to the loops also. This is no good. We were deprived service in the whole Co-op City. I was at the big meeting, the rally, over at the Paradise Theater. And Jay Walder was over there in 2010. And I said to him, Jay, if you're going to have a 38th line, you're going to cause chaos. And what is it doing? It is causing chaos through the whole Co-op City. Mr. Pendergast and the whole board, I would like you to look at the problems in Co-op City, because we are having Macy's in Co-op City and we're going to get more people to ride the buses. We need more buses in Co-op City. And the number 50 line you could straighten out, because the Q50 line goes to Flushing. And you need more buses on the 50 line and then more buses on the BX23 line. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Where are we here? Marty Goodman. Marty Goodman still here? Melissa Chapman. Some momentum here. I can feel it. Yeah. No, but I.
Good morning, Chair Pendergrass, Vice Chair Ferrer, and other members of the MTA Board of Directors and guests. My name is Melissa Chapman, and I'm the Vice President of Government and Community Relations at the Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce. Today I'm here to deliver testimony on behalf of our President and CEO, Carlo A. Cesura. The Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce is a membership-based business assistance organization which represents the interest of 1,300 member businesses as well as businesses across the borough of Brooklyn. The Brooklyn Alliance is a not-for-profit economic development organization of the Brooklyn Chamber which works to address the needs of businesses through direct business assistance programs. We wish to commend the MTA Board of Directors for putting the B37 bus line onto the restoration list, and we hope that you would see it fit to restore the bus fully. In so doing, you'd be effecting positive change along the 3rd Avenue commercial strip and improve economic conditions for neighborhoods such as Fort Hamilton, Bay Ridge, Gowanus, Park Slope, Sunset Park, and downtown Brooklyn. It is estimated that before the budget cuts in 2010, the B37 served approximately 3,200 passengers every weekday and weekends along 3rd Avenue. Along this stretch, there are hundreds of storefronts that provide goods and services to surrounding communities. And in turn, this is a very viable source of revenue for these neighborhoods. Without the B37, riders are faced with looking for alternative, sometimes more costly options with which to get around. While the B37 was rerouted to fill some of the gaps that were left by the B37, it only goes as far as 69th Street, which is an added inconvenience for riders heading into Sunset Park. In addition, the B70 does not have a direct stop to downtown Brooklyn, which is a commercial hub. As our neighborhoods continue to thrive economically, it is important to have a transportation system that supports such development, and having a reliable bus line such as the B37 along 3rd Avenue would be an enhancement to the economic development. In closing, I just want to urge the MTA to vote to restore the B37 bus line. It would demonstrate that you're a true champion for economic development in Brooklyn. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Imogene Stamper. And then Sally Kaya Hill.
Good afternoon. I'm not going to be redundant. I'm from Co-op City.
and the bus service is terrible now. For instance, my grandchildren live on the Grand Concourse. At one time, I'd take the 26 bus, go to Bedford Park, get off, and transfer to a 102 going down. Now I have to get on a 38 or a 32, and then transfer again. And the waiting is a long time. On top of that, I would like to also speak about the stop that they call 125th Street on the express bus. That bus stops on 121st Street. It is the only bus stop on the line that one has to walk 4 blocks to get to a crosstown bus. And that bus takes me to church and to other activities. So would you just please consider that they should make another stop, because that's a bit much. And I am a senior. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sally Cahill, if I have the name correct, I hope.
That's correct. I am Sally Cahill. I'm also from Co-op City, and I want to reiterate the irrational way that the buses were rerouted in 2010. Contrary to what Mr. Pendergast said, there was very great opposition at that time, no consensus at all about the changes. Co-op City is set up in a circle of the traffic pattern, would go in a circle, and then the buses go out to other destinations, other terminal points. So in the name of cost cutting, they introduced a new bus line that is costing more than it has possibly saved. That is the BX 38, and it follows the same exodus to the western part of the Bronx, the Norwood area, as the Co-op City BX 28 used to do and still does. So the result is you have more buses going to the same destination, probably carrying fewer passengers per bus, and it's really not a saving at all. It is an expense. And the inconvenience other people have pointed out, but some of the buses now have been routed to go in a counterclockwise way, and the others go in a clockwise way to the same destinations. That's what was meant by the claim that the changes were irrational. There's also the situation of the Bronx QBX 23 and 50 going out one way and not returning the same way. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anthony Gronowitz, to be followed by Amy Varghese.
Hi, I'm the mayoral candidate for the Green Party. I'm on the ballot this November. So after you hear me, you'll see that I speak as a native of New York for the working people of New York, of which I am one. First of all, the cutbacks must be restored. It should be pointed out that while homelessness is at a record in this city, we once had, and the stock market is at record high, we once had a stock transfer tax that was in effect from 1905 to 1980. Billions would be raised if we had this tax restored. Other cities have it right now. Now, the cutbacks stem fundamentally from the financial relationship of the MTA to the big banks. Recall that the MTA was created in 1967 by Governor Nelson Rockefeller to protect the value of the bonds his brother David's Chase Bank issued, and which ultimately sacrificed public interest to private gain. Moreover, the interest paid out on these bonds must be paid before workers' salaries and before service on the bus and subway lines is maintained. A better system would be to have the TWU run the transportation system. The workers represent the 99%, while the MTA and the big banks represent the 1%. Workers can do a better job running the city than the private banks that are responsible for the greatest disparity in wealth and income in this city since the 19th century. And I use the Fiscal Policy Institute statistic on this fact. We are heading for an Armageddon in this respect. Private interests should serve the public, not vice versa. Remember November 5th, you will have a real choice, not people who kowtow to real estate and to the big banks running for office. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Amy Varghese, and then Francine Jones. Ms. Varghese, that's 2 strikes. Francine Jones. Philip McManus. Vincent Austin. I feel like an auctioneer. Yeah, that's a good thing.
To the convened members of the board, good afternoon to you. My purpose in speaking at this hearing is not to address you as sitting representatives of the MTA, but rather to address the assembled members of the media in attendance. This is now the 3rd time that myself and some of my fellow workers who were unceremoniously dismissed from our jobs and years of service to the handicapped and elderly residents of this most populous and most densely populated city in the nation have spoken in this forum with no noticeable progress having been made. On March 31st of this year, 678 employees of First Transit were given the boot from jobs they had been doing for a number of years, with a number of the senior staff having 10 or more years of tenure, myself being one of that group. While we should have been the first ones to be offered jobs that would be absorbed under the MTA umbrella, we were let go while friends and relatives of MTA staff, noticeably Tom Chin and Rosemary Venero, were given positions that other, more qualified and deserving workers should have been offered first. Does the MTA not pay attention to 13C regulations, federal regulations I might add? What is it that we want? Fair and just consideration and job placement in positions we had already been capably handling, with some of these having been made part and parcel of the MTA, and at least what any employee in the same situation rightly expects to receive: compensation for any unused vacation and sick days and floating holidays. We all were let go without being given any of these owed forms of compensation. As mentioned at the outset, the board has made their position clear, being silently complicit with what has transpired here. That is why we choose to address you, members of the media, in the attempt to amplify our voice and intensify our message.
One more try for Amy Varghese, then Robert Cornegie. Amy Varghese, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm here representing Councilmember Margaret Chin of District 1, Lower Manhattan, which includes a number of major public transit hubs for subways, buses, and the New Jersey Path. I was very happy to hear of the new route additions and restorations to her district on Monday, including the M weekend service to Delancey, Essex Street, and weekend service restorations on the M8 bus route across Lower Manhattan. Thank you for those changes. However, her district is growing and we have need for increased services. In particular, there are many neighborhoods in her district, including Battery Park City, Chinatown, and the Lower East Side, without good access to subways, making bus service all the more important. The community was thrilled when you restored the M9 bus service to Battery Park City last year, but we would also like to see later M22 service on weekends. The M22 runs from Battery Park City to Lower East Side. Currently, it shuts down around 9:30 in Battery Park City and Lower East Side, respectively. However, many people work on the weekends and visit their families and have complained to us that this early shutdown of service limits their ability to travel. I also urge you to increase the frequency of M5 service in the village. I've heard complaints from constituents, especially seniors who have waited long periods of time for the bus, an issue, especially in recent heat waves. We have also heard concerns from residents on the east side of our district who feel that bus service has greatly reduced in the past decades in the Lower East Side. In particular, they've asked that the M103 be run more frequently, given the rerouting of the M15, which no longer travels down the East Broadway to City Hall and instead runs on the outskirts of along Madison Street. Residents have complained that they have noticed 4 or 5 M101, M101 Limited, and M102 buses for every M103. Finally, I want to reiterate previous comments the council members made in regard to the reduction of subway station agents over the past 10 years. We have seen a large number of subway booth personnel removed entirely or reduced in hours at stations around my district. I believe that while this practice may be cost-saving, it adversely affects the safety of subway riders. Stations like the Chambers Street ACE, the East Broadway F station, and the Center and Canal Street NQ, R, and J have lost station agents in 2009, and since then a number of crimes have been reported in the press for that station. We have seen numerous instances where the presence of MTA workers have helped avert crimes. In 2012, an MTA worker at the Bowery station was able to intervene and save a young woman who was being sexually harassed, and an MTA employee on his way to work was able to save a young man who had a seizure and fell off the subway tracks at the Delancey Street station in April, a station where booth attendant hours were cut.
Could you wrap up, please, Ms. Farkas?
Yes.
Thank you.
When you consider how you will spend extra funds raised from the cost-cutting measures and fare and toll increases, I hope that you will keep in mind not only the increase in services I mentioned, but the importance of making your riders of all ages, races, sexual orientations, and genders feel safe when they ride the subway by putting back some of those station booth agents who have been removed. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Carnegie. To be followed by Keisha Wheeler.
I'm going to have to adjust this. Good afternoon. First, I want to just ask your indulgence on my somewhat relaxed dress, but I'll be leaving here directly to go fight for the moratorium on the hospital closures for the borough of Brooklyn. I'm here on behalf of State Senator Velmanette Montgomery, representing the 25th Senatorial District in Brooklyn. Dear Chairman Pendergast, congratulations again on your appointment as Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of the Metropolitan Transit Authority. On behalf of the Restore the B37 Bus Coalition, I'd like to thank you for your agency's participation in the June 13th community meeting. I'd like to acknowledge the MTA representatives Sarah Weiss, Dorian Statham, and Andrew Inglesby, who attended and participated in the discussion on this important issue. My constituents are grateful for the opportunity to have their concerns addressed. For years, my constituents and I have fought to have service on the B37 restored. The B37 runs through the heart of my district and is a critical artery connecting communities of downtown Brooklyn, Boerum Hill, Gowanus, Red Hook, and Sunset Park. I'm pleased to hear that the MTA plans to restore service on this important bus line. In addition, I'd like to express my appreciation for the responsiveness of the MTA on other transit issues important to my constituents, such as the High Street Station, the Smith and 9th Street Station, the G Train, and the B57 bus. It was my distinct honor to vote in support of your nomination, and I look forward to continued dialogue for the benefit of our constituents. Sincerely, Senator Velmanette Montgomery, State Senator for the 25th Senate District. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Wheeler. To be followed by John Cimino. Mr. Cimino still here? Thank you.
Good afternoon, board members. My name is Keisha Wheeler. Here to discuss the layoff that was taking place directly by MTA losing a contract. As my ex-co-worker was just stating, we're protected under the 36C law that regulates us to have our jobs reinstated. Now, back in March, while we were losing our jobs, Mr. Pendergrass got a promotion, received his accolades and smacks on the back, but while my co-workers and I was applying for unemployment, in some cases welfare and food stamps. So while you guys are enjoying your summer and you're having your barbecues and your kids are catching butterflies, our homes are getting foreclosed on, our cars are getting repossessed because we're out of work. As far as the media, I'd like to address you guys too, because you're dropping the ball. The only media representation that we had was from the chief. Now, I watch all y'all news publications. You guys will report on cats kissing dogs, but you had nothing to say about 700 people losing their job, not over a period of time, but in one day. I'm pretty sure when you guys decided to be journalists, you came into this with some integrity. What happened to your integrity? What happened to reporting the news? You're trying to say that 700 people being out of work in one day, 700 pink slips, 700 families could have been thrown out in the street, and you guys don't think it's fair enough and responsible to report what's really the news. Have a good day.
Thank you very much. Mr. Cimino. And then Benjamin Gamarin. That's correct? Good. Thank you. John Cimino, then Benjamin Gammeren.
Good afternoon. First, let me congratulate Mr. Pendergrass on your promotion. I hope you just remain more open-minded than Mr. Walder and Mr. Loader had concerning the 38,000 members who are still without a contract and who have lost about 10% of their wages in the last 18 months. With that, I would also want to congratulate you on your raise that you probably got with your promotion. TWU is not going to tolerate any problems getting their retroactive pay. This board, Mr. Loader and this board, previous to your chairmanship, had no problem or no mention of net zero when you gave MTA board member and Capital Construction president Mike Haran-Naisadu his retroactive pay for 3 years on top of his $262,000 salary. I never heard net zero with that raise. This board had no mention of net zero when you gave a retroactive pay to board member and Long Island Railroad president Helena Williams, added to her $229,000 salary. I can go on. Lord knows how many other members of this board and the MTA and the thousands of vice presidents and director of directors, top-heavy administration and management got their raises and their retroactive pay. We're coming for ours. Just be notified. Most of my presentation I would like to just give to the press, because in my 30 years in transit, I have seen that this board has no interest in its workers. Okay? There are adversaries, and they remain so with this contract. Last month we came here concerning, actually it was a month and a half ago, June 5th, we came here concerning the 700 layoffs at an accessoried call center called First Transit, run by the MTA. We asked for an investigation on union busting, discrimination, and nepotism. Within a week, through our lawyer, we got a whitewashed report, 3 pages, admitting some nepotism, not addressing any of the other issues on discrimination and union busting.
Can you please wrap up, please, Mr. Cimino?
You can give me a second.
Okay.
That report should be thrown in the garbage, and we demand a new investigation into the nepotism, which was admitted in your first report. How you did a full investigation of 700 workers being dismissed and accessoried in 1 week is beyond me. Finally, your disrespect of the accessoried program and the accessoried riders, the disabled and handicapped of New York, and its heroic workers has no end, and it's beyond reproach. You have total disrespect for that program, and those 700 workers need to be made whole and need to be put on a transfer list into MTA jobs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Benjamin Gammeren.
Good afternoon. My name is Benjamin Gammeren. I am a shop steward with the Public Employees Federation. I do IT work for a New York State agency, but I'm basically here as a transit rider who has worked in Lower Manhattan for 33 years. I gave the people a spreadsheet of up to 33 times that I've gotten letters from the MTA, New York City Transit, because of problems with MetroCards malfunctioning. I think it's a common law right for riders to be able to get into the system paying the lowest possible fare and to be able to get in an efficient manner. I would like to suggest a solution to this problem. First, we hire more station agents. Second thing I'd like to suggest is that you have a central control room which would be connected to every turnstile and or in every MVM machine that would be able to fix problems with Metro cards in real time, or have station agents connected to such a control room, and using the technology that's currently used by when people give their Metro cards in sent to a central area. At this point, it doesn't sound like this can be done by regular station agents, since they frequently just tell you mail the thing in. We're moving to a time of high technology, and the problems we have is there are Metro card vending machines that say no bills, no coins, single rides, no debit and credit cards, Metro card cannot be read, and little efforts made for people to get into the system on a real-time basis. In conclusion, I'd like to know if there's anything I can do to help out and try and make this upgrade of automatic fare collection a reality. I'd be willing to volunteer to help out as long as I wouldn't have to pay extra fares to the MTA in order to do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm going to read the names of some people who I believe are have left, but I just want to make sure. Barry Adler, Edwina Herrera, Julius Brody, Edith Hadley, Paisley Harry, Doc Harvey, Eleanor Bailey, in which case is Mr. Phil Fox here? Our final speaker. Thank you for your patience. Come on up.
Good afternoon, MTA Board. I thank you very much for the opportunity to be able to address you. I hope I'm last but not least. I thank you very much for your time. As I look around the room, there are some names that are familiar to me. I know Chairman Pendergrass from meeting with him in the past. I'm from Staten Island. I've had some issues with the express bus service, and just to be very brief, my service difficulties involve the X17 bus, which runs somewhat often, but during the day it runs once per hour. Now, last week I waited for the bus. I probably just missed the bus by 10 minutes, causing myself to wait 50 minutes for another bus. That next anticipated bus did not show up. I was stuck waiting there for 2 hours. I have a bad knee. There was nowhere to sit down. I stood there 2 hours waiting for a bus. When the bus finally came, there were no seats, certainly reasonable to understand because of the backlog of passengers. Once the bus got downtown to Lower Manhattan, because of the standing room only, they bypassed all the bus stops in Lower Manhattan. Now, we have to realize that people were waiting there for 2.5 hours. This is a common practice on the X17 because the bus originates on 57th Street. And every time it comes from 57th Street, by the time it reaches downtown, by and large, there are no seats and standing room only. So people waiting downtown along Broadway are waiting for 2 hours and can't have a bus. It's just got to the point where it's unacceptable. I've spoke with the Chief Strategy Officer, Mr. Cipriani. He's verified all of the buses that I said have been missed, and he's working on it. I say one other issue as well is here on Vesey Street, the express bus service stops at 7 p.m. After 7 p.m., it's like Kansas. The streets are rolled in. There's no longer any express service on Vesey. You've got to walk to Broadway, okay? Standing room only, and I stand all the way home. It's deplorable. I say one last comment. I hear many comments from the board about revenue, losses, gains. The local hometown paper of Staten Island, the Staten Island Advance, has recently focused their attention to the fare beating and the costs that are associated with the MTA and the loss of revenue. Just quite recently, the MTA has given the Eagle team the opportunity to be increased. They ride the buses. They've caught, in a period of 2 or 3 weeks, 900 fare beaters where summonses were issued. I urge this board. We need revenue. We need the service restored. That's a given. Nobody is going to dispute that. We all need to have that. But we need money. We need funds. I urge you to increase the Eagle team and allow people who are riding the bus paying their fare the equal opportunity for people who are not paying their fare to be held accountable to make them pay the fare that's on the books so that they don't get away with it. The riding public who pay continue to pay and pick up the slack for those that don't. And we need more Eagle Team people to ride the bus and give those summonses. But in closing, I thank you for your time, and I hope that they will restore some service to a later hour on Vesey Street so we're not Kansas. This is the financial capital of the world. This is supposedly the greatest city in the world. Come to Vesey Street at 7:15 and there's no express bus. I scratch my head and wonder why. Why is that? And it's in your power to do something, and I urge you to take that stand. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. That concludes the public comment.
That concludes the public meeting. We move a motion for adjournment. Second. Okay. Thank you. Steve, I got to visit over. Okay. Any questions? No questions?
All right. Tom, can you just talk a little bit about the notion of what costs are uncontrollable and the degree to which the progress that we're seeing compared to February is pretty tenuous if some of those costs continue to rise and if you can't get a handle on those large future expenditures?
We define controllable as that which we can take action and be able to control costs. Uncontrollable, where we require the actions of others. So pensions, health care benefits for people that are retired, things of that nature. And I think Bob Fran did a very good job of explaining how we have focused over the past 3 years at those areas where we can't control costs, and now they're down at or below the rate of inflation, while the others are above that. So the longer that erosion continues, the more at risk our budget will be on a cumulative basis. So one of my focuses is to go to those that can effectuate some of those uncontrollable costs, make sure it's unmistakably clear how they're affecting us, and what ask we may make of them with respect to actions they could take to control those costs and get them more in line with what the rate of inflation is. That's it in a nutshell. Once you get to be 61, what's urgent is different than it is when you're much younger. But it's an ongoing concern. It's an ongoing concern. And the fact that some of them haven't been dealt with is because they're difficult issues. They're not easy issues to solve. When you start to talk about things like pension and you start talking about things like retirees' health care benefits when somebody's on fixed income, you can't just walk into a room and walk out with a solution. So it's an ongoing concern, but we're at the point now where we need to start addressing it because of the erosion it could cause. Greg.
You know, you've worked here a long time. When you see that number, that 1.3 billion in savings, in 2017, does that indicate how far we've come, how far you've come, the cuts that had been made, maybe how much waste was there in the first place?
Yes, but nothing surprises me at this point in my career in the sense that you're asked to do something, and maybe your initial reaction is, I'm speaking about me, that no, we can't do that. But you find out that you start to apply a focused attention on it. You get a lot of people in a room with you that can help you solve that problem, and you come up with implemented solutions to deal with it, and then you look long term. You don't look every day how you're making progress. You look up after a period of time and you find out you've made progress. The analogy that I'll give you is that when David Gunn came to the New York City Transit Authority and said we're going to eliminate graffiti, I'm like 32 years old, and I'm saying, that ain't going to happen. And, we started to implement a plan. We started to effectuate change. 5 years later, we looked up. Most of the graffiti was gone. I think it took probably 6 years to get it all removed. But the difference between what I thought at the start of the process versus where we got to, and it's the same as here with 1.3 billion in savings.
Let me ask then about the fare increase, because that has been inching up as well too. And we're going to write the headline today that there is one plan on one for 2015 and for 2017. In your mind, in the agency's mind, does it get to a point where that is end up where it is going to be too much, or it's going to become tougher to sell to the public?
There's 2 points, one of which is the financial plans that we have been presenting over the course since I returned here in 2009 have had biennial fare increases. Where that's a drastic departure from the past earlier in my career is that some level of understanding that on a periodic basis you're going to have a fare increase, rather than going 5 or 6 years without a fare increase, because then when you have one, it could be relatively large. But certainly when you look at what the cost of that fare increase is with respect to inflation and how it impacts people, that's an area that we've got to look at. So the issue of what the size of that fare increase is and how we can manage our costs and increase our revenues to maybe have a different number than what's projected today is a focus we will have. Matt.
Chairman, I think one of the sort of surprising unfavorable reestimates from February was that there was lower fare revenue than you might have expected. Though still growth, obviously, in ridership over some of those months. Why do you think that that estimate was not?
Hurricane actually attributed to a lot of that. I also think that there was some projected growth. I've been through a number of economic downturn cycles just in New York in my career, and there's no one way you go into them. There's no one way you come out of them, and you try to use the tools that you can to predict how you'll come out of one and what revenues you're going to see, how ridership's going to grow, how the economy's going to do, and it's not a science, it's an art. So I think some of the projections we had in terms of how fast the economy would come back and how strong may have been different. The hurricane affected us, all the above. Pete?
Pensions is one of the uncontrollable costs. I guess that's set by the state legislature, and that's like a big issue in these documents. Do you have a specific proposal, or do you expect to go to Albany and ask the legislature to craft some sort of pension change?
Go back to the question that was raised earlier, I believe by Ted and I answered, is that we've got to have a dialogue to make sure it's clear how that uncontrollable cost is affecting us. So the dialogue starts with a clear understanding of what are the current pension issues that are driving cost, how they're affecting us, and what possibly could we do to change that to reduce that exposure. And that's where the dialogue starts. So I think the days of going up and saying we need more money have changed. We haven't done that in a few years. We've tried to control our costs and get our act together first. And the days of going up and making a demand have changed in the sense that, you know, I can feel for a legislative person that's got to balance revenues on their side with expenditures across more than just transportation, health, education, all the different needs that the state has. So the dialogue starts with a clear understanding of what the issue is, how it's affecting us, and how we may be able to mutually identify solutions to that problem.
Can you talk about your drive to cut overtime costs and how that's going and how you see it in the future?
One of the things you've got to do when you run an agency like ours, we're 24/7, we deliver service, we've got critical maintenance needs to get done. At the end of the day, we've got to put service out there. So if there isn't an employee available because he or she calls in sick, we've got to find somebody else. If we have a problem because an emergency occurs overnight and we've got to restore something to have safe, reliable service the next day, we make that expenditure. So we will always have overtime. There will always be overtime. The question is, what can you do to be able to keep your eye on that and make sure that it's within an acceptable range? And so we're always doing that. The last thing you'll ever hear from me, if ever, is after an issue like Hurricane Sandy and people are clamoring for the restoration of the full level of service, you're not going to hear me say or see me say to anybody, hold down overtime costs. That's not where you apply it. You apply it at a much higher level over a longer period of time where you have potential for abuse or improper application of overtime. So it's a constant focus. It has been from the time I started here in 1982.
Just one more on the in the recovery from the hurricane. Are you starting to see that other usual costs than the ones we've discussed are rising? I mean, we've talked a lot about the infrastructure you have to replace, but is it more expensive to insure yourselves? Is it to plan for?
I believe yes, it is more expensive, but it's not just us. It's across the entire spectrum. Insurance companies don't stay in business if they continue to lose money. So when there's a one-off event, whether it's Hurricane Andrew, whether it's Hurricane Sandy or whatever the cost of insurance was before versus the cost of insurance after, there's always a change. Yes, we're seeing some increased costs there. We are seeing some increased frequencies of failures that actually you have to spend overtime additional material costs. But I think it's too early for us to tell what the magnitude of that is. We'll have to look at it over time. And ideally what we can do is if we spend the recovery money and the mitigation money fast enough and most efficiently, we can minimize that as much as possible. Thank you very much. Okay. There's no doubt about it, weather events can influence a transit system. Heat has very unique consequences for continuously welded rail. It has consequences for air conditioning for underground systems. Heavy rain does the same thing. I think it's been clear that for the past few years, whether you want to argue what the cause of it, some level of climatic change is occurring because we're seeing an increased frequency and magnitude of storms. The governor stated very, very clear at the front end of Hurricane Sandy, and he commissioned the 2100 Commission, and one of the major outgrowths of that was, irrespective of why it's happening, it is happening. There's a recognition of that. Stewards of the public asset of the public transportation system have to be in a position to, we just can't say to people, whoop, it was a heat kink today, whoop, it was a temperature rise. We've got to be able to manage the system in a way where we either don't have those resultant effects or we minimize them. So in answer to your question, yes, it's a concern, and yes, we're doing things from a standpoint of mitigation to be able to address them, whether it be heat, whether it be storms, whether it be any one of the climatic issues that could affect us. Thank you very much.